Some ideas are just naturally cool. Monkeys doing backflips, cats wearing sunglasses, a third thing, etc. One such idea is to take Monster Hunter, a game with a vibrant cast of diverse and iconic dragons and beasts, and press it into a Pokemon-shaped mold. The result would be, well, it would be Monster Hunter Stories. 8 years after its original release on the 3DS and mobile platforms, the first game in this spin-off series arrives on modern consoles in the form of a polished remaster. Featuring all the original game's content and DLC, prettied up with updated textures and sporting a few extra goodies, the Monster Hunter Stories remaster is an appealing RPG package. But how does this turn-based monster collecting game hold up so long after its original debut? Discussing graphics for the re-release of a 3DS game might seem a little odd, but don't worry, I mostly just want to praise how gorgeous the game looks on modern hardware. The cartoony art style, which looked good on the small dual screen, really shines in HD, as the colors and geometry complement each other to create an extremely pleasing and crisp visual identity. Add to it some really competent and deliberate lighting choices, and you have a really strong example of a great art style that doesn't need to rely on realism to convince and delight. Good art direction does not age, after all. The simplistic geometry of the open maps also makes exploration intuitive and fun. A special highlight are the monsters. Migrating the naturalistic, realistic designs of the main games into this style, while retaining what made the designs work in the first place, could not have been easy, and I think they pulled it off extremely well, to the point where I'd actually really enjoy a mainline Monster Hunter game in this style. With over 100 critters, some are bound to look better than others, but it's overall a very competent offering. There are a few blemishes worth noting though. Not all of the game's textures seem to have survived the upscaling process flawlessly. It only takes a bit of scrutiny to find seams and artifacts. But keep in mind that this is a nitpick. It didn't really impact regular gameplay for me at all. Another sore point for me was the UI. While most of it is crisp and pretty, it's also really large, especially out in the field. To illustrate, monster dens are full of gathering spots that you might want to hit up, but every time you grab one, you get this massive notification while Naviru yaps at you at the bottom of the screen. Add to this the massive minimap that you can hide, but that resets after every loading screen, and you're losing a lot of screen space just by doing a fairly mundane action. At its worst, this UI can outright blind you to what's actually happening. It's not the biggest problem, but still, I would have really loved an option to resize the UI. Before we move on, I have good news on performance. It's great. Across my entire playthrough, I encountered no stutters or lag at all while playing on PC. There was like one visual glitch involving an endgame weapon, but it only happened on a sparse few occasions. If you like looking far ahead in video games, you will notice some pop in the distance, mostly gathering spots. Monsters and monster dens, meanwhile, remain visible across admirable distances, which is quite cool, since that's the stuff you want to see the most, presumably. Being called Monster Hunter Stories, you'd hope for the story to be good. Well, great news! The story is really solid. The game takes place in an alternate imagining of the Monster Hunter universe, where there are not just hunters, but also riders. This unique culture does not hunt monsters, but rather tames and befriends them. You play as a young aspiring rider from Hakum Village, who, after an unsupervised exploration tour with two friends, unexpectedly bonds with a newborn Rathalos. Their budding kinship is interrupted, however, by the return of the Black Blight, an environmental catastrophe that ravages flora and drives fauna into a violent frenzy. Its dark emergence causes much chaos and tragedy, and as a result, you set out on a journey to see the world and discover all sorts of monsters worth taming, all the while looking for a solution to the Black Blight and following the traces of a childhood friend gone rogue. On this journey, you are joined by many different characters, including the odd feline Naviru, who becomes your main partner and sidekick. I am keeping this part vague because I think this story is best experienced without spoilers. It really surprised me how many different tones and settings ended up getting explored in here, and I ended up enjoying this story more than that of the sequel. I was especially impressed by how much my feelings on Naviru changed. In the sequel, he is mostly just annoying, but this game actually makes him quite likable, as well as intertwining his story into the game's main plot very effectively. The story is also paced pretty well, taking you through a variety of locations and set pieces at a really good rhythm. I was never bored or fed up with any one location. Also, again, no spoilers, but the entire final section of the game is some serious peak fiction. One of the new features of this remaster is that the entire story now has voice acting in both English and Japanese. I opted for the English voice cast and was mostly happy with it. I loved Roberto's insane accent and Cheval's melodrama. It's all appropriately riding that thin line between cartoony and cringe, and feels overall very fitting for the style of this game. One sticking point for me though was Chief Omna. While the voice performance was good, this character speaks entirely in rhyme.
Perhaps it was tainted by a blackened heart, or maybe a Congalala fart.
This was probably a cute gimmick when it was text only, but when performed out loud, it gets really grating, especially as he has a lot of dialogue and his rhymes are often pretty forced and kind of bad. This particular part of the game could have benefited from a revised English script, in my opinion. One thing to note is that this game tells its story in various different styles. There are pre-rendered cutscenes, in-engine cutscenes, and then portrait-style dialogue scenes. This last type makes up a large chunk of the game's storytelling, and it's where the game's 3DS origins shine through the strongest. This does not have to be a bad thing, but it's worth being aware of. Personally, I only ever minded these when they contained actions and moments that really felt like they should have gotten the full cutscene treatment. The gameplay can roughly be separated into 3 categories: exploration, combat, and team management. Exploration takes place in open zones of varying sizes, where wild monsters roam and monster nests can be found aplenty. It's here where you do the riding, traversing the lands atop your monsters and using their unique abilities to overcome various obstacles, using a Tigrex to climb vines, or swimming through water with a Zamtrios. This feels great, for the most part. Every monster has a different feel to it as you control it, which is good in that it makes each of them feel unique. However, some are just objectively more pleasant to control, which is a bummer if your favorite monster sucks to ride. There's also some weirdness when gathering. Your monster walks forwards a few steps automatically, and it's kind of disorienting at first. You get used to it quickly enough, though. That aside, exploration is delightful. There is a great variety of areas which all have their unique feel to it, and a unique roster of monsters waiting to challenge you. Unlike the sequel, this remaster does not allow you to fast travel from anywhere, and instead has you travel from designated caravan posts only. This is a positive in my opinion, as it keeps the game tense and gives exploration a real bite. You can't just teleport away from danger. There's also much to find, from special monster spawns to many Poogies in varying outfits, which will give you a pretty cool reward if you find them all. When you run into a wild monster while exploring, you enter the game's second gameplay type, combat. Monster Hunter Stories uses a turn-based combat system in which attacks may be assigned to one of three types: power, which beats tech, which beats speed, which in turn beats power. Each turn, participants choose attacks and, when two of them target each other at the same time, they clash in a head-to-head, and the one who chose the winning type gets to perform their attack while only taking minor chip damage. When both the player's rider and their monster gang up on one target and both choose the correct attack type, they perform a special move that does extra damage while entirely preventing the enemy's attack. It's an extremely simple system on the surface, but one that hides ample depth. Attacks can have multiple effects besides damage, and some attacks don't have a type and don't interact with this matchup at all. Additionally, the player doesn't always control their monster directly. In fact, for the most part, it acts autonomously. As the battle goes on, the player builds up kinship, a resource that can be cashed out in various ways. It can be used to take control of your monster and give them a specific order, or to perform a special move of your own. When the kinship gauge is full, it even allows for a powerful ultimate attack, unique to each monster. You also need to use items effectively, and prepare a battle pouch of items beforehand to actually have access to them in the fight. Add to this that enemy monsters can have really complex conditional AI patterns in how they attack, and you have a system that can, at any point, really tighten the screws and confront you with a real challenge. Boss fights are a particular highlight, with many of them feeling intentional in their design without being too gimmicky. I was genuinely surprised at how difficult this game got at points. One late game encounter forced me to essentially rebuild my team and come back with a bespoke strategy. It felt great. Don't worry though, the majority of the game is still very manageable, and you can always just grind out more levels if you're really stuck. However, there is unfortunately one major thing holding back the combat. Some monster AI is almost too good. It's so complex and able to create such varying strategies that it's extremely difficult to learn their patterns and retain them. There are over 100 enemies in this game, and it's virtually impossible to remember how each fight functions. This isn't always a problem, but at its worst, this makes the combat feel entirely random, with monsters busting out new moves completely unpredictably, and that's pretty frustrating. An option to look up or note down monster patterns after a first encounter would have really helped here, because as it is now, it can sometimes feel like I'm not mastering a fight and rather just flailing and hoping for the best as the enemy does something completely random. The third gameplay type I just alluded to is team management, and this is where the RPG nature of the game really shines. As you would in Pokemon, you build a team of 6 monsters that aid you in battle. 5 actually at first, since one slot is reserved for Rathalos during the story. You recruit monsters by invading monster dens and stealing eggs, which you then hatch to see what you got. Dens are scattered around the world and can even be specifically summoned by paintballing a monster during a fight to potentially have it retreat to its nest, where you will find eggs of that specific monster. The roster of monsters you get to choose from feels extremely solid. While understandably smaller than that of the sequel, it's still got immense variety. The pace of the story also helps here. I found myself using loads of lower tier monsters I had never really thought of, because I had to make the most out of what was available at the time. So the game does well at using its limited roster to get you to experiment, which is further enhanced by the right of channeling. All monsters have genes that give them active abilities, like Fire Breath, and passive qualities, like better fire defense. The rite of channeling then allows you to transfer these genes between monsters. giving you virtually endless customizability in how your monsters work. Want to give the docile Aptonoth a laser breath? Go for it! This can even influence the appearance of your monsters. If you give them enough genes of an element that they don't usually possess, the monster's appearance will change to reflect that. This single feature gives the player so much freedom in how they build their teams, as any monster can fill any elemental role while still having its own natural up and down sides. And finding new powerful genes is just extremely fun. I cannot wait to see some of the busted builds people will post once the game goes live for everyone. Team management is not flawless, however. When collecting eggs, you can use the pattern and color of the egg to try and predict what monster is in it. But every monster has 4 possible, slightly different egg designs, which quickly makes it extremely hard to tell what you're getting without having a chart open on a second screen. This adds nothing and should have been removed in this remaster, especially since it was already removed in the sequel. Likewise, when transferring genes, you still can't freely move them into any open slot on the recipient monster, they need to be in the same slot. This isn't as egregious and didn't really affect my enjoyment, but it's worth noting as it was a fairly disliked feature from the original release. Also, a very quick word on the postgame. As of writing this review, I haven't sunk my teeth into it that much yet, but from what I can tell, it seems really beefy, with a variety of challenging extra content to take on. I will definitely be sticking with this game for a while. Lastly, let's briefly talk about what this remaster adds and changes from the original release. Keep in mind, I did not play the original version, and so I might miss some subtler changes. What we have here is an extremely faithful remaster, for better or worse. The main additions for the remaster are English and Japanese voice acting, a museum mode that allows you to peruse the game's concept art and listen to the soundtrack, and all DLC the original game got included in the game for free, with the exception of the Legend of Zelda crossover, which is absent. These are all major additions I could find during my time with the game. The real value of this remaster is its upgraded graphics and its availability on modern hardware. There are also a few quality of life changes here and there. You can quick heal your party and switch out your lead monster with a quick menu. And when playing with a controller, it will vibrate while collecting eggs to tell you the quality of the monster inside of it. The stronger the vibration, the stronger the monster that will hatch out of it. Monster Hunter Stories is a triumphant re-release that lets this forgotten RPG banger shine like never before. The updated graphics retain the game's art style beautifully, and the new features of the remaster are welcome additions. It tells a fun, interesting, and sometimes shockingly dark story that carries you through this RPG adventure with ease. The game's intricate battle system and team building remain a strong highlight, with the Rite of Channeling offering an amazing amount of variety and customizability. It is only really held back by occasionally frustrating enemy AI and some cumbersome UI. While the game is sure to delight newcomers, this remaster might not add enough to justify its purchase for someone who has already played the original a lot. But if you just want more Monster Hunter Stories, this remaster will leave you more than satisfied. Thank you as always for watching, everyone, and of course a special thank you to all of my patrons. I want to especially thank M1, Regal Eagle, Ronger97, Quali, El Zendo Carlo, My Name Gone, The Dollarfish, Yamiroth, King Dre, Ryan Hook, Veraxas, Thick, Kuroneko, Zion H.V. Augenson, A.J. Rivera, Alistair, Jacob Denumnut, Soruka, King Greatest, Sir Newt, Evie, Rambling Robin, Hashi, Black Ace 202, Dissy, Hubbo Himbro Mirror, Magenta, Danilo Villavicencio, Arcturian711, Russell, Vulgar Beast, Person212, Claire Miboon, Oakwood Tree, Mr. Pyramid, Makoto02, Geo, Jamie Tate, Nils Schlatter, Iron Camel, and I'm going to bed. Take care everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.